Well, good afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome you to this panel on the Vermont ABLE program. Really excited that you join us on a beautiful Thursday afternoon when I'm certainly sure there's a lot of other things that you could be doing today, but this is a really important program, and it's one that was established a number of years ago under the leadership of Treasurer Pierce. It's been a growing national movement, and I was really excited when I took office to try to continue to find ways to promote it. It's something that I believe a lot of people who are eligible for it, and a lot of family members, and even those that are professionals in the financial field that have clients who are eligible for this tax deferred program, are not aware of it. And we really want to try to bring more awareness and more understanding about its benefits. This year, we did get our 1,000th ABLE account established. I think that's really good progress, considering we started just before the pandemic, and of course, the pandemic interrupted a lot of plans that we had to promote and to expand things like this and other financial literacy projects. One thing I want to just highlight about the stable program and its partnership, we've been able to leverage the resources and relationships of other states to provide this program at an even lower cost than we would be able to do on our own. It's a model that we've used for this program, but it's also a model that we're exporting to what we call Vermont Saves, which is a publicly administered retirement program where we are partnering with the state of Colorado. So it's a great program. It's one that we're, again, partnering with fellow treasurers to try to bring down the costs to Vermonters and really view that as a win-win all the way around. So I want to provide the other panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves, and maybe I'll start with Commissioner Kevin Gaffney.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Thanks, Treasurer. Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Gaffney. I'm the Commissioner of Department of Financial Regulation, and myself and DFR has teamed up with the Treasurer's Office and other agencies on a whole host of financial capability issues, and it's really important to focus on that, not just this month, this financial capability month, but all year long. And the key, as I see it, in our role as protecting consumers, particularly vulnerable consumers, is not only protection through our enforcement of our laws, but through education, giving people the protection of knowledge, and also just making sure that there's equal access to financial services. So I think this is, again, another example of how we're reducing some of those barriers and giving that and facilitating and supporting that access. So appreciate participating.
Thank you. I can jump in and introduce myself. Hello, everyone. I'm Kirsten Murphy. I'm Executive Director for the Vermont Developmental Disabilities Council. I use she, her pronouns. And the DD Council, as we call it, is a public board here in Vermont. There's one in every state and territory. We are established by the federal government and asked to bring the voice of individuals with developmental disabilities and their families into policymaking in order to ensure that they have the supports and services they need. And we've really had a wonderful partnership with the Treasurer's Office over the years in making sure that beneficiary voice is part of the ABLE conversation.
Well, thank you both. And we have here a short presentation that I'll walk through and then turn it over to Commissioner Gaffney. And, if there are questions along the way, please feel free to raise your hand, but we'll have opportunity for that a little bit later as well. So what is ABLE? It stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience. It's part of the 529 code of the IRS. So if you're familiar with a 529 plan that you have for yourself or for a family member, it's very similar in terms of its tax structure to those 529 plans. Only here it creates a tax advantaged investment account for individuals with disabilities that they can use for approved expenses related to that disability. It's pretty broad what it can be used for: education, transportation, medical care, some home care. Um, it is, I'm sure we'll hear more about that, but even though it's limited to those with disabilities for disability related expenses, it can be quite broad. The assets in your account don't generally affect any asset tested benefits like SSI or Medicaid. And I think that's the really important part of ABLE. If you did not have an ABLE program and you were starting to save assets for yourself as someone with a disability, once you got to over $2,000 or so, you would start to see an impact on your benefits from the federal government, potentially from the state government. So it really puts people in a hard position to save for themselves, to start to accumulate assets that are outside of what's provided to them by the federal government. It makes family members, I think, really nervous about what's going to happen with their son or daughter or brother or sister, because they can't give them funds in their own name in case of an emergency or other need. So the ABLE program allows for that, and you can save and invest pretty much up to $100,000 before it might start to impact your federal benefits. So that is a big advantage of the ABLE program. If we go to the next slide, David, just wanted to show the national landscape here. So almost every state in the country now has an active program with ABLE. Our partnership is with the state of Ohio. We are happy with that partnership, as I mentioned earlier. Some of these programs are opened up nationwide to all residents. Others are opened up just to their residents of their state. But here in Vermont, we encourage you to reach out to our team, visit our website, learn more about the program. There's a lot of information on the treasurer's site. And if we go to the next slide, David. So this is more about Vermont's ABLE plan itself. I mentioned that we have partnered with the Ohio Treasurer's Office. That partnership over time has allowed for the accumulation of assets, not just in Vermont and not just in Ohio, but all the states that are part of the partnership. And that's where we're starting to see the discounted cost per account, which is great. If we were to do this on our own, we would not have seen that kind of discounted rate because we're just too small. But by working together and having the benefit of all the assets under management, we're starting to see the cost go down. And we had an announcement this year that the cost would be going down, which was great because that was the theory. And now we're actually seeing it in practice. So we mentioned that at the federal level, it was passed in 2014. This is also, I should mention, something that needed to be done in partnership with the federal government. We couldn't have done this by ourselves in Vermont because we would only have been impacting the Vermont benefits that are available. By doing it with the federal government and having the federal government provide this framework that states can take advantage of, not only are you protecting the state benefits, but you're protecting the federal benefits as well in terms of establishing an ABLE account, saving, investing, and earning money on those investments. So Vermont took advantage of this program in 2015. As I mentioned, Treasurer Pierce was very at the forefront of this and provided a lot of leadership. So just the next year after the program passed nationally, we got it established here in Vermont. It is administered by our office at the Treasurer's Office. And it took a couple of years to formally launch the program, which we did in 2017. For the Ohio partnership, this is just an example of who's in that partnership: Ohio, New Mexico, Georgia, West Virginia. You can see quite a variety of states, both in terms of their size and their geographic distribution. This partnership of 10 states has about 25% of the national market share of ABLE accounts. which puts us at just under $400 million assets under management as of December 2023. And then here we see in terms of Vermont, I mentioned we crossed that 1,000 individual accounts open threshold not too long ago, now closer to 1,400 accounts, which is, again, great to see. That average account balance has gone up too. It used to be about 8,800, now almost 9,500. So again, if you think about that $2,000 threshold that we talked about, everything over that would be subject to potentially impacting SSI or Medicaid. And now that is not the case. And you see the average account size balance growing. And then you also see for Vermont, the total assets under management also growing now to over $10 million. So again, we're moving in the right direction in terms of awareness, in terms of people establishing accounts and putting money in and saving and starting to see investment return. And that is really exciting, but we want to continue to make sure we spread the word about the benefits of the program and who it might be most beneficial for. And I think that is where Commissioner Gaffney will take over.
Thanks, Treasurer Pieciak. Yeah, on the benefits, one of the first items here is empowering. And, it's not just the regime and the structure, but it's it is that level of empowerment. It does very much tie into Financial Capability Month and our focus, allowing individuals with disability that access that prior to the passage of this law wouldn't allow them to save. So just having that sense of ability to manage for their future financial independence, and just the social and impact of that. And also Treasurer Pieciak touched on something that certainly I've experienced in my life, and that is the worry that those caring for those with disabilities have every day, and all that worry about the structure within the Medicaid and SSI system. So again, allowing for some flexibility through this program for those to account for things other than just direct disability related needs that we all have. So I really think that whole supporting financial independence is critical. And having that ability to save is something that now this program will give, and not be limited to the current kind of structure of our social support systems. And the third bullet here is really also critical. As financial regulators, one of the things that we see as sometimes a barrier to just accessing financial services more broadly is being part of the banking system, and just being able to participate in banking and credit union activities. So this provides that opportunity for this population to get out of that kind of maybe a barrier. So I'm really excited about just the structure that this regime holds up. And again, this is part of the 529 structure. So the earnings are free from federal and state income tax. So there's certainly the IRS tax benefit and the benefits that the treasurer pointed out of leveraging this program with other larger entities to make this more cost effective. So on this next slide, we talk about funding the account. And that again can be funded through electronic funds transfer or checks. There's an annual limit of 18,000, more if you're working. And I think we'll talk about that on a later slide. There's a lifetime limit of 541,000, but there is the sublimit if you are receiving SSI or Medicaid benefits, as Treasurer Pieciak pointed out, of 100,000. And the system is all built to not, to protect you from that. So there's systems checks and edits to make sure that folks don't go over the contribution annual limits. And the other thing that is helpful and again maybe provide some peace of mind for family members to support those that have disabilities or friends. I mean, I have neighbors here, and I've often wondered, "Gee, how could I help them?" And some of them have incurred, like, severe accidents at a young age, and their lives are changed forever. And so I love this idea of a gifting mechanism, and even just a birthday or holiday or special occasion way to reach out to family and friends, and also a way to kind of for the recipient to thank them. So I think that's it's a wonderful concept and a wonderful structure. So if you are able to work, there's actually, additional limits available, particularly for those that don't already have some kind of deferred compensation benefit at their place of employment. So there's an additional, it's the lesser of this $14,500 AD cap or 100% of earnings. So that's a nice additional benefit for those that are actively working and to save, again, for different things, including education and housing and all host of benefits. And as I mentioned earlier, on the next slide is just the funding caps. So there are, the two caps that can be kept in a Vermont ABLE account. And there's the 541,000, but then there is we just wanted to put it in the slide because we will be recording this. So for folks either on today or for those that you may share this presentation with in the future, you can kind of provide that education to them. So there is the $100,000 cap for those receiving SSI benefits, because we wouldn't want folks to exceed that and compromise the access to those benefits. And the next slide just talks about the investment options. And I think the structure of this is great. It has, four options that have some exposure to equities, but also a fifth option that allows for a principal protected FDIC insured option, because it really depends, again, on the individual's interest and their time horizon and need for funds. So we wanted to give all of those access points as we would, as many employers do with their deferred compensation programs. And the next slide just covers the costs, which, again, appreciate the treasurer's partnership with other jurisdictions. I think that's what helps keeps these costs down. So these are relatively low, $3.25, $39 annually month maintenance fee, and then a asset-based fee that's on average 1/4%. So I'm going to hand it over to Kirsten, who's on the ground doing this every day for Vermonters. And Kirsten is the executive director of the Vermont Developmental Disabilities Council. So I'll hand it over to Kirsten.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. We can turn to the next slide. Perfect. So I'll just say a little bit of introduction. I am a parent of two individuals with developmental disabilities, now adults. And I spent years trumping up Capitol Hill, trying to, talk with Congress about the benefits of this this opportunity written into the tax code that became ABLE accounts. And it took quite a while, even though there was really widespread bipartisan support, but it was well worth the effort. So, who can use Vermont ABLE? There are rules around eligibility, and there's an eligibility quiz that you can find on the website. The most basic rules are there can only be one account per person. We without advertising, I want to say that Vermont ABLE, that is part of the stable program, is the program that is monitored by our treasurer. And so we know with a lot of confidence that, he and then also the council go to regular meetings and are paying a lot of attention to this count. There are some other programs available nationwide. You can learn about those at the National Resource Center. We'll get that link at the end of the slide deck. as far as I know, all sound programs, but this is the one that we make sure is right for Vermonters. So 1 account per person. Individuals must have had the disability occur prior to the age of 26. That is going to be changing in a couple of years. That will rise to 46. But right now it is still 26. That was a compromise that advocates had to make when advocating with Congress because of sort of an initial trepidation that, wow, this was something really new and we'd be opening the doors too wide. And frankly, there was a bit of a concern about how many people might use the account who have later onset mental health disabilities. And I think that we've really, come to understand this is all a positive and good thing. And so we're wanting to open those doors still wider to more veterans, to people with later onset neurological conditions, and people with mental health conditions that often occur later, a little bit later in life. So in a couple of years, that age of onset will change to 46. To use Vermont ABLE, you must be a Vermont resident. And then there are 3 ways to qualify. Sort of 3 doors that get you in. One is if you are already eligible for SSI or SSDI, you are eligible for an ABLE account. That's the easiest, and 88% of people using Vermont ABLE certify in this manner. A very small number of people use the second option, which is to have a condition that is listed in the Social Security Administration's list of compassionate allowances conditions. That's really less than 1% of our users. And then self-certification is something that about 11% of Vermont ABLE users do. And if we can go to the next slide, I'll just explain self-certification. This is something my son needed to do. You need to have a diagnosis of a physical or mental impairment that causes, the language is marked and severe functional limitations. Not my personal favorite language, but that's what it says in the Social Security Administration Blue Book. And you need a medical professional to certify that the condition will last at least a year and put down there in a letter their name, address, date of diagnosis. You don't need a formal diagnosis. You can just get kind of a physician's letter. The important thing for people to know is the last thing a treasurer's office, either in Ohio or Vermont or anywhere else, wants is a copy of your personal medical information. They're not going to ask you to see that letter. You are attesting truthfully that you have it, should for some reason these accounts ever be audited in some manner. Seems very unlikely, but it is the appropriate thing to do if you aren't someone who's collecting SSDI or SSI and you have a qualifying disability. You can go get a physician's certification. Go to the next slide. Enrollment is really quite easy, but I always have to explain to people, you don't just go down to the bank. It is an online enrollment. It is free. It takes about 20 minutes. And now the initial deposit, you can open an account with just $25. That also has gone down. Many people that I talk with about ABLE don't feel confident they personally can sign up by themselves, and they may have other parameters around personal decision making, like a guardianship arrangement. The individual can open their own plan, or they can have an authorized legal representative, and I'll show you where to find more description on what that is. But they can certainly have people either help them. I help people often to sign up. Or they can have a formal person who is a support person in their life work with them on getting signed up. Next slide. So here's the fun part. The IRS really, when they came to rulemaking, really broadly define qualified disability expenses. It's anything that relates to your disability and helps to maintain or improve your health, independence, or quality of life. And that can be really, really broad. We've talked about many of the things on this list, but many of these things are also sort of out of reach for people with disabilities who are reliant on public funds. Like you have enough to get by for the month, but not to take that extra course that's going to help you get a new job skill. Or maybe not to deal with an unanticipated dental emergency. Maybe not to get that piece of assistive technology that was only partially covered. Or to do some things that, longer term goals of yours. Even something as maybe seems a little extravagant, but I always give the example because I'm asked all the time, well, can you spend this on taking a vacation? I'd be careful about that, but basic living expenses are acceptable. What you cannot do, though, here are the things you cannot do. You cannot take your mother on the vacation with you because that's a gift, okay? Now, if your mother has to go to support you because you cannot be safe on a vacation without that or with a support provider, then arguably that's a required and disability-related expense. But to be very careful about gifts. And of course, there's some other categories like gambling that we wouldn't consider to be appropriate in any way for these accounts. But it is very, very, very broad. And I think like everything in the tax code, it does rely to some degree on people's trust and goodwill and honesty. Again, the people who administer ABLE accounts are not going to take a careful look at what you have spent the money on, but you want to spend it appropriately because of the possibility of an audit. And that's the way everything works in the tax code. Can we go ahead to the next slide? So if you do spend the money accidentally on a non-qualified expense, for example, a gift, you just made a mistake. Nobody's going to jail. But the amount that you spend on the gift, the penalties are that amount becomes reportable as an asset when you're needing to qualify for SSI and Medicaid and other federal benefits. And there is a tax penalty laid on a portion of that withdrawal that you spent inappropriately. So that's just, there's more details available in the plan disclosure statement, but that's just some of the rules. Next slide. So spending from your account is easy to do. There are no limits, and you can transfer money to a personal checking or savings account if that is reasonable for you. I also highly encourage people who need an ABLE fund to pay a regular recurring expense to just set up an electronic bill paying system, like for something like rent. And then this is one of the best parts of the program, the stable card. So let's turn to the next slide. Looks like a credit card, but is not a credit card. The stable card is actually a loadable debit card. It acts more like a gift card. And what it allows you to do is to make a deliberate decision that you want to access, say, I'm just going to pick $100 out of your stable or ABLE account, and you preload that amount of money onto the card. That card will only allow you to spend the $100, right? And it's widely available anywhere else that a MasterCard is taken, except that you may not turn it into cash. You cannot go to an ATM and you cannot go to a bank and withdraw the $100 as cash. There's some other types of expenses that are, I think online gambling is actually not allowed. You cannot use the card for that. There are codes that freeze those things out of these cards. For obvious reasons. So this is a great, I think, compromise and security for people because you have the freedom of having access to some of your money, but you can't make a mistake and kind of overdraw more than you intended to spend, more than was prudent for you to spend, because the focus is on saving with these accounts. I can take my debit card and make mistakes if I choose to. Hopefully I'm old enough not to. But often people who are, using stable, they are often folks who are younger adults learning about budgeting. And this is one of the great ways that I see stable cards used, is a family can work with an individual, counts in the individual's name, and preload a certain amount of spending money onto the card. And then the individual has the real-time experience of figuring out budgeting over the course of a month or however that they work that out. And if the individual allows it, text messages can go to the parent or guardian, letting them know how the card is being used. And there can be conversations and kind of ongoing learning about how to manage a budget. And this is a really great path to financial literacy, especially for adults who haven't had a lot of opportunity, young adults who just didn't get a lot of that opportunity before in their lives. Next slide. Housing, I just flag this every time for people. There is a little glitch, I think, that needs correcting in the system. But if you do pay for housing through your ABLE account, it is really important to know that you must withdraw the money and spend it on the housing within the same calendar month. And I have tried to find out the reason for that odd rule, but I have not been able to. I hope someday we kind of fix that, but it's an important enough mistake that I let people know about it. Next slide. So as we said, the major consideration is for Social Security insurance. Balances over $100,000 push you off of Social Security. It actually means that your benefit is suspended, you are not fully kicked off, which is good because it's very hard to get reestablished. And what one should do is spend down below the $100,000 and your SSI will be reinstated much more quickly. I often, talk with people, if you've been lucky enough to save that amount of money, good on you. And you should think about some kind of down payment on housing, so some other place to put also an asset that is not going to be counted for your public benefits, that is going to give you long-term security. And I have had a few beneficiaries who've been lucky enough to be in that position. Go on to the next slide. People ask a lot about this, and this is an area that's possibly going to be changing. If the beneficiary passes away, the account passes to the estate. And one thing that people have generated a fair amount of energy around is that the federal rule allows state Medicaid programs to seek to recover some of the Medicaid benefits that were paid out on a beneficiary's behalf during that beneficiary's lifetime from the period when they opened the ABLE account forward. So Medicaid is allowed to, and the not very polite term is claw back or recapture a piece of what it spent out on your behalf in your lifetime. That is true of other types of assets that someone might have if they were a Medicaid beneficiary. But this one has proved to be a particularly triggering barrier for families and individuals. And frankly, these accounts are not as big as we thought they were going to be. So we're talking about a few $1,000s when someone passes on. And yet families in particular say, oh, I would never want my daughter to have an ABLE account because the state, meaning the Medicaid authority, might get, take that money away. It's not entirely, rooted in exactly what's, it's disproportionate. The worry is disproportionate to what might actually happen, but it is a true barrier. So at least 18 states have passed laws to just give up Medicaid's ability to recapture funds, just say we're not going to take them. And we've been working with Treasurer Pieciak and are hopeful that Vermont will very soon join the ranks of states that don't do that, because it's an unnecessary barrier. And frankly, it's quite a headache to try to follow up on that recapture in the first place for very little benefit to the state. So, while we are saying wonderful things about the treasurer, I had forgotten to say this when the stable card came up. Thank you so much, Treasurer Pieciak, because the stable card now has a cost of $5 a month, and your office has been covering that for Vermonters, and we're really grateful for that. We really want people to have that opportunity to use the card. Next slide. I think we're just about done here. So yes, this is just more about the recapture issue. We can go on to the next slide. And yes, people also ask, well, should I have a special needs trust or a stable account? I'm not a lawyer. I'm not in a position to advise you. But really, they shouldn't be seen as a one or the other. Lots of people use both. If you are lucky enough to have enough assets to have a special needs trust, that's wonderful. And Stable has some very different uses. And so it might be an interesting and useful complement to your financial planning for your family member. But lots of people don't have the assets to create a special needs trust. And that's part of why Congress saw it as a matter of basic fairness in order to be able to give average folks an opportunity to be saving for the disability related expenses, which can be considerable. Next slide. I think is just going to give you some resources. One of the reasons we love partnering with Stable is they have an excellent customer service team that's available to people with questions. There's the website listed here for Vermont ABLE. I will tell you that if you are someone that likes to read the details, the plan disclosure statement is linked from the bottom of the landing page, and it will tell you everything, including the investment performances in each of the 4 Vanguard funds over the last few years. And then if you want an independent look, there is the National ABLE Resource Center, also linked from this slide. And I think we have time for some questions.
Well, excellent job. And that was really great overview and I think provide a lot of information for everyone that might have a member of their family or might be working on behalf of a client or themselves to see really the benefits and also the eligibility. So appreciate everyone's participation. I see a question came through, and I actually saw a question come through on the chat that I guess I could mention. Somebody asked a question about the fact that the age of 26 is going to be moved up to the age of 46. And I believe that starts in 2026. My memory serves me right.
Correct.
And so there was a question about if the current administration changes, and I believe they mean federal administration, will that be guaranteed? And that was an act of Congress, so nothing that nothing that anybody running for president alone could undo. And I'd hope, regardless of who wins, it would stay in place. And I'll leave it at that.
I want to say that ABLE was widely supported, had wide bipartisan support. This is not a political issue.
So
I see a question about a condition that's it was not diagnosed until I was over 26 years old. I often speak with adults who were diagnosed later in life with forms of autism. That is a lifelong brain-based condition. So a medical professional would certify that the onset of that diagnosis, regardless of when it was identified, is prior to the age of 26. And that would be true of other types of diagnoses.
I see some folks have their hands raised, so I'm just going to unmute those folks. I see Sarah has their hand raised, and so Sarah, I'm gonna unmute you and feel free to jump in and ask your question.
Thank you. I'm sorry for this question, but just to be clear, if my son has a stable account or anyone, we do not file because it's tax-free. We would not be filing a tax return on that account. He's on SSI is his only income right now, so we do not file taxes. If he's not working and has a stable account, are we required to? We would not need to file taxes. Am I correct?
Well, I can't speak to your whole tax the whole of your taxes. I can tell you that the money in the ABLE account is not something you report on your taxes. And if you were to withdraw money from that account, you also do not report the withdrawal because the interest, which is the only new money that you're withdrawing, is tax-free.
Okay, great. So even if you, and then moving forward, when he does work or a person is working and that is required to file taxes, I do not report incoming or outgoing or any interest from that stable account.
Well, incoming is a different question. The money that goes into an ABLE account is most likely taxed at some point. say grandma gave you a gift. Well, grandma still paid taxes on that money, probably. Say he earned money as, working at a store here in Montpelier. And that's income, it's earned income, and that must be reported, and it is taxed, even if a portion of it is put into the stable account.
Okay.
But when you take that money out, you've already paid taxes on it. You don't pay twice, right?
Okay. And Kirsten, can I just throw this out? One of our goals of creating that account for him as a disabled adult, intellectually disabled adult living with us probably the rest of his life, unless things change in the state of Vermont. How does a person like that then save for a vacation? I had in my head that's how he would save for our annual vacation, that is expensive and not extravagant, but an annual vacation is what every living adult wants. Some actually ask for 2 vacations, but 1 vacation a year. Is that not considered a living expense for an adult?
Well, I can't speak to the sources of income that are available to people with disabilities. I mean, it's why we encourage employment, because you will always do better if you're working than just drawing SSI.
Yeah.
One of the vacation is a little bit of a fuzzy term here, but one thing that a lot of adults save for is an extra week at camp, because adult camp is a very popular activity for adults with developmental disabilities. But again, the money has to come from somewhere, and it can be earned, it can be gifted. Sometimes, well, remember the pandemic where we all got stimulus checks. A lot of people opened accounts because they had a stimulus check, and that was going to kick them off of SSI. Unintended consequence of what was supposed to be a public benefit. So people quickly put that money into a stable account so that they could save it for something more important to them than, going out to eat this week. So.
Okay. Thank you.
And looks like we have a question from Kevin. So I'm going to unmute you right now, Kevin, and feel free to jump in with your question. Looks like we'll move to Christine, who also has a question. Gonna allow your mic. Okay, well, I see we have some questions in the chat as well. We have a question from Kaylani. The question is, my condition is congenital, but I wasn't diagnosed until I was over 26 years old. Can I still qualify for ABLE?
Yeah, I think we chatted about that one, and the answer is yes, with a doctor's certification.
Great.
There's
And
Kate's question.
well, I'm sorry, did someone else have a question?
I see a question from Allison that I would could answer. Will you send us the slides? That I leave to the treasurer's office decision. That looks like a thumbs up. It says, I work with a person who's very interested but has a significant amount of money and a lot of questions. Who can I refer her to so she can chat? I will always chat with anyone, but I am not a tax professional. And if somebody has enough funds to talk to an attorney or an accountant, that is what they should probably do. I can recommend a special needs attorney who I know is very familiar with the program, if that's helpful. There's a question from Kate. Do you expect that ABLE accounts will impact balances at credit unions? serving as a, I don't think that those things are related, Kate. Does that help? I don't think those are connected. The balances at credit unions, that's a kind of checking account. Those balances are, those are counted by asset tests, such as the one that Social Security does.
Thank you, Kirsten. And Kevin, I think I heard that your mic was working. So if you're ready, whenever you're ready, we will take your question.
Well, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. I apologize. This is Kevin from VCIL.
Huh?
I'm wondering if anybody has an idea which fiscal year Vermont might consider stopping to recoup Medicaid costs.
Yeah.
And that's
So
my question.
Yeah, no, thank you, Kevin, for that question. As you heard, we're working closely with the legislature to make it 19 states that eliminate that clawback. And it's in the budget, which has to pass. So it might not get all the way through the process before the end of May, but we are certain that it will pass before the end of the year. And if I remember correctly, the language goes into effect July 1 of 2024. So I think it would have an almost immediate impact. We'll keep, we know the budget has to pass, and we'll keep making sure the language is in the budget. I think there's agreement on the language. It's just at this point a matter of making sure it doesn't fall through the cracks as potentially different versions of the budget are crafted late in the session.
And
Thank you,
Kevin,
Commissioner.
I know that at VCAL, I'm sure Sarah and others I'll be informing them, and they'll be sharing that information out with the Independent Living Network.
Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you, Commissioner.
And I see we have one more question in the chat from Christine. If a grandparent is looking to finalize their estate plans and they create a stable account, will this gift count against them, the grandparent, if they need long-term care later in the grandparent's life?
I'm not sure I understand completely, but if the grandparent, if the grandparent is creating the stable account, oh, I see. The grandparent might be creating it for a younger family member. Got it. No, I'm actually not sure how that would work for the grandparent. I think that because the account goes into the name of the beneficiary, it wouldn't be counted on any reporting of assets that the grandparent would need to report. Does that sound right to you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, if you're, it's generally like a 5-year look back, right?
That's right. There's a 5-year look back, right?
So if you're outside the 5-year look back, I think the answer is pretty clear, because that would apply to any gift or any, expenditure of funds. If it's within the 5-year look back, I'm not certain how they would, I'm not certain how they would do that.
Yeah, I agree, Treasurer. I think you'd have to consult with a Medicaid consultant. Yeah. I think there was a hand up by Noel, perhaps.
Well, if anyone has any additional questions, feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat. Thank you all so much for taking the time to tune in today. Before we end the call and hop off the webinar, I want to just give a thank you to each of our panelists, and I also want to send it back to each panelist to just give one final word on ABLE accounts, potentially one final word on Financial Capability Month. But again, thank you all so much for attending, and I will pass it off to Treasurer Pieciak, and the floor is yours for a final word.
Yeah, well, thank you, David, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in this afternoon. just such a great product, I believe, can be very helpful to individuals and, like I said, to their families. And it's a financial product, but it also can provide emotional security and reduce anxiety for those loved ones that are concerned as well. So I encourage you to look into it, reach out if you have questions. And again, thank you for being with us. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, I guess I'd echo those, and I would say thank for those who are joining and the questions and the comments. I think it's always helpful. I would say we're always trying to find ways to meet more of the masses. So if you found this helpful and you know others in this same circumstance, I would say, share this information. This is, I believe, going to be recorded, and we'll be getting you additional information on how to access this and memorialize this message. But it's a great program. Appreciate the Treasurer's Office leadership and Kirsten's support of our vulnerable communities and all the work she's doing. So I'll hand it over to Kirsten.
Thank you. So just a big thank you to the treasurer and the commissioner, because these are the kind of real life bread and butter issues that people in the disability community really, really care about, and I really appreciate your support. I am just coming from the Voices and Choices conference, which ended yesterday. 600 self-advocates or people who experience an intellectual and developmental disability. I was lucky enough to be able to present about ABLE there. And I had a room of about 50 people, and I had some folks that had accounts and were using them to good benefit. But most of the people in the room hadn't opened an account yet, and they were all eligible and would really benefit from these opportunities. So I'm just committed to continuing to spread the word. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you, Treasurer.
Thank you all.
Take care, everyone.